We will now begin with the presentation of the Canadian Electricity Association. Please introduce yourself and you may begin.
Merci, Madame la secrétaire d'audience, et bon matin. Mon nom est Francis Bradley. Je suis le président et directeur général de l'Association canadienne de l'électricité. Effectivement, je demanderai aux membres de notre délégation de se présenter avant notre présentation ce matin.
My name is Alex Kent. I am a Transmission and Distribution Policy Advisor at CEA. My work includes supporting the CEA Telecom Committee.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Robinson, and I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing at the Canadian Electricity Association.
Bonjour, mon nom est Barma Khosravi. Je suis ingénieur en télécommunications dans l'unité architecture de solutions de télécommunications chez Hydro-Québec. Je siège sur le comité des technologies et télécommunications opérationnelles de l'Association canadienne de l'électricité.
My name is Saul Lancashire. I manage telecommunications engineering at BC Hydro, and nationally I chair the CEA's Operational Technology and Telecommunications Committee, also known as the Telecom Committee.
Bonjour, Sylvain Riendeau. Je suis membre du comité sur les télécommunications de l'Association canadienne de l'électricité et chargé de programme d'innovation à l'Institut de recherche d'Hydro-Québec.
Good morning. My name is Charles Burnt. I'm the manager of grid technology at Hydro Ottawa, just here across the river, and I'm also vice chair of the CEA's Telecom Committee.
And Bram Abramson, outside advisor to the CEA.
Thank you, colleagues. Distinguished Commission, our request in this proceeding is focused. We ask that you direct the Canadian Steering Committee on Numbering to amend Canadian IMSI assignment guideline to allow critical infrastructure operators to acquire MNCs. The critical infrastructure sectors that have had an interest in this proceeding have demonstrated a substantial need whose fulfillment will allow continued innovation in electricity grids, advancing the social and economic fabric in all regions of Canada, but providing for MNC access also substantially advance the basic telecom policy objectives that you seek to fulfill.
Members of the CEA employ more than 2,000 Canadians in telecommunications roles. Our network spans tens of thousands of route kilometers of fiber and tens of thousands of more on wireless backhaul links. These networks connect more than 12 million endpoints, each with a unique identifier. We have a long history of connecting remote devices to monitor and control the electrical grid. Think of us as the original Internet Thing of operators. Our members run research labs, design telecom solutions, and deploy telecom networks to connect devices at scale. We've been doing it for decades, but our sector's traditional business models are evolving in ways that engages both electricity and telecom. Distribution grids are getting smarter.
Like the railways you heard from last week, telecom isn't some external functionality that we can outsource. It's core to what we do. We run intertwined power and telecom networks that meet stiff security standards to enhance power grid resiliency and efficiency. Both those grids are evolving into smart grids. Think of onboard devices that poll each other about what's needed where, and in a power outage can act accordingly. Even at a smaller electricity utility like Hydro Ottawa, generation and consumption are starting to take place throughout the network, in both directions. That's what's needed to integrate better resiliency and fault tolerance, and more distributed energy resources like solar panels. Different telecom operating CIOs work with different geographies, resiliency designs, customer bases, and therefore different network and operating models. But all of us are completely aligned in the following. We must continue to route our own traffic. MNC access is the only way to do that. Full MVNOs have had such access since 2015. The public safety broadband network has such access. but the critical infrastructure operators with some of Canada's most extensive telecom networks do not. Without MNC access, critical infrastructure operators cannot interconnect core to core. Without MNC access, we cannot sit down with mobile network operators and negotiate in a way that lets us meet our obligations.
Quand nous parlons d'innovation, cela signifie travailler dans les laboratoires de recherche comme je le fais à Hydro-Québec. Nous continuons d'innover en créant des modèles d'exploitation pour une vaste gamme d'appareils connectés, tels que les topologies hautement maillées et auto-réparatrices, par lesquelles nos millions de terminaux s'engagent les uns avec les autres, plutôt que de devoir téléphoner à chaque fois à un opérateur central. Il y a plus de 7 ans, j'ai co-rédigé un article de l'I3E décrivant le modèle de PVNO. Pour être clair, un PVNO est simplement un modèle permettant de relier plusieurs réseaux d'accès de type LTE ou 5G, par exemple, qu'ils proviennent d'un opérateur sans fil traditionnel, d'un réseau à large bande de sécurité publique ou d'autres partenaires. Ceci en un réseau maillé et intégré, identifié sous un seul MNC et distinct de chacun des réseaux en amont dont il dépend. Le chemin qui mène du concept qui a mené du concept à la demande de partie 1 à l'Association canadienne d'électricité sur le PVNO en 2018 a ainsi été l'objet de recherches approfondies. Nos secteurs sont confiants en cette demande concrète et qui est davantage qu'une simple vision ou un rêve ou une intention générale. Les membres de l'ACE, qui gèrent les réseaux de télécommunications, se procurent de la connectivité, qu'elle soit auprès des 3 grands opérateurs de téléphonie mobile, de satellites comme Télésat, ou bien de partenaires plus spécialisés comme Tamani Internet au Nunavik, Antel dans les territoires Nisga, ou bien ABC Allen Telecommunications, également en Colombie-Britannique.
And when we talk about cybersecurity, we mean well-specified standards coordinated by the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Our members' networks must meet these NERC standards regardless of cost. This responsibility cannot be outsourced. In our British Columbia PVNO testbed, for instance, where integrating NERC compliance is a key part of the case we're proving out. By the way, you'll notice in our second attachment that that testbed has 3 MNCs assigned to it. Testbeds are able to get MNCs, but they're also needed post-testbed too. Cybersecurity is not a reason for us to outsource to a telco. It's one of the reasons we can't outsource. With an MNC, on the other hand, it means we can procure connectivity in bulk from multiple carriers while maintaining responsibility for standards compliance internally. CEA members have been sharing information about cyber threats with what is now the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity for more than 4 years. Running highly secure telecom networks is the job of every CEA member.
Il a été question dans cette instance de l'attribution précise des MNC. Par exemple, s'il faut attribuer un bloc d'MNC à 2 chiffres par opérateur d'infrastructure critique, ou par secteur, ou bien en associer un seul à l'ensemble des opérateurs d'infrastructure critique. Nous sommes d'accord avec l'Association des chemins de fer du Canada que l'allocation plus granulaire se traduirait par plus de simplicité opérationnelle. Nous convenons également que l'utilisation efficace de cette ressource limitée est essentielle. C'est pourquoi nous privilégions ici l'accès au MNC pour les opérateurs d'infrastructures critiques qui exploitent un réseau de télécommunications d'envergure. Nous sommes donc ouverts à une formulation restrictive. Cet accès pourrait, par exemple, cibler les opérateurs d'infrastructures critiques dont les réseaux de télécommunications dépassent un certain seuil d'appareils communicants ou de kilomètres de fibres, de territoires couverts ou de tout autre critère jugé approprié par le Comité directeur canadien de la numérotation, ou CSN. Mais nous convenons également avec le RAC que la délégation au CSCN est la meilleure approche ici. Pour illustrer ce point, nous avons joint à notre présentation 3 documents. Le premier est un extrait pertinent de votre décision de 2015 et une approche semblable que vous pourriez adopter en relation avec la présente demande. Le deuxième document est une liste récente de l'allocation des MNC au Canada. Et le troisième document décrit une activité en cours au CSCN en lien avec l'utilisation des MNC.
There's been a fair bit of talk about threats at this proceeding. We're trying to change the channel for a minute to present an opportunity. We're not here to ask for specific tariffs or exemptions or heavy-handed intervention. We have only one request. It is simple and will help unlock competitive telecom market forces to best serve Canadians. It's time critical infrastructure operators were able to move forward with creating MNC-numbered networks. Lowering the cost of rural and remote connectivity and fueling the competitive intensity of Canadian wireless telecom are opportunities worth seizing. We'd be glad to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you. Commissioner Leisner.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I have a number of questions for you. Si vous désirez répondre en français, ça va aussi. Alors, mais je vais commencer mes questions en anglais. So, you've talked about your request for a private virtual network operator type model. And I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on the types of services that you envision a PVNO offering would entail.
There's a number.
One mic at a time.
There's a number of services that we would consume, particularly machine-to-machine for grid operations, either in our distribution grids, controlling electricity, turning electricity off when in urgencies. It is one of the most important ones. So in our industry, we refer to that as fault location, isolation, and then service restoration. So there's a lot packed in there, but finding out where the energy is flowing and being aware of it, responding to emergencies, and coordinating our response on a machine-to-machine level. Not sure if anyone has something to add.
Yeah, if I could add to that, add a bit of color about how the electricity business is changing in Canada. We're going from a world where we had large generation, transmission, and distribution, and the customers kind of downstream from each other. But we're evolving to a world where generation and distribution and consumption is happening across those networks. So customers are able to store energy, generate energy, and consume large amounts with electric vehicles. So that need that my associate, Mr. Lancashire, discussed, where we need to have that connectivity and that broadband connectivity to route that traffic both between the central office and those devices is critical. And what we envision a PVNO enabling is with an MNC, we would be able to route that traffic in our own ways to the most reliable network available. And that is critical. And the only way to do that is with an MNC.
So in terms of what the proposed network would look like, for example, who would manage the network? Would that be the Canadian Electricity Association itself, or would it be individual critical infrastructure operators that would build out their own networks and then become NVNOs or PVNOs of each other?
Maybe I just want to offer up a clarification. Is when we talk about a PVNO model, these are all, as is my understanding, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, different electrical utilities that run their own networks today, have done for years, and will continue to do so. So whether or not they run networks doesn't depend on being able to deploy PVNO connectivity as part of those operations. The difference really is in their ability to move into broadband spectrum, in their ability to get pervasive connectivity, and their ability to sort of depend on their networks by routing that traffic themselves everywhere throughout the network, and therefore to deploy some of the applications that we've been talking about. So it's the question of if is really one about what kinds of investments and what kind of applications they're able to invest in that they will make, especially as equipment life cycles go and they're constantly faced with these challenges of what to buy next. And so, in a sense, they will continue to run networks with or without PVNO connectivity, but certainly, and that's what I've been hearing in discussing rather intensely with these folks in the last few days, the ability to have secured PVNO connectivity creates the ability, as they've been accustomed to for years in narrowband spectrum, to route dynamically, to send bandwidth to upstream connectivity partners as those have a better or worse quality of connectivity at any given moment, to mix in radio access networks that they build themselves or that they procure, for instance, from different partners that they go out and issue RFPs for. So it's sort of like if you're engineering an entire network, if you're simply depending on one provider at a time, you're a little bit captive. Whereas if you have the ability to dynamically route traffic among several upstreams, you're able to really assemble that rope with several strands rather than hanging by a thread, so to speak.
And to answer the question directly, CEA members each operate their own telecom systems and will continue to do so and want to continue to do so.
So it would be individual PVNOs, basically, amongst each CIO. Is that, do I understand correctly?
Oui, effectivement, quand on parle de PVNO, ça implique d'avoir un réseau cœur cellulaire chez les opérateurs d'infrastructures critiques. Donc, on opère nous-mêmes le réseau cœur, mais la partie de radio, le réseau de radio est opéré par l'opérateur commercial, par exemple.
Bien, OK, je comprends. Anybody else who wants to add?
Juste rajouter un point, c'est que ce modèle-là permet de conserver la sécurité à l'intérieur des opérateurs d'infrastructures critiques. Donc, le but, c'est d'utiliser la couverture existante, mais conserver la partie sécurité vraiment à l'interne de nos opérations pour être conforme à la sécurité.
Parfait.
I just want to, again, distinguish a little bit, and just to make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about running separate networks and even separate, I suppose, PVNO-style connectivity beds, that's not the same thing, and it doesn't bleed into the discussion about how to allocate MNCs. And so you certainly have contexts where you may have a bunch of networks, a bunch of electricity networks, for instance, all running and being managed separately, but cooperating under a single MNC, so in a sense, sharing routing policy. That's simple to do, for instance, when you have geographically non-contiguous, I should say, networks, so that it's fairly simple to federate them geographically under a single MNC. So it does get quite technical, but I do think it's important to draw that line between MNC efficient allocation on the one hand and separate networks underneath that MNC or not on the other. And I don't know if this is an important topic to you. It may be worth hearing a little bit about the test bed that's underway now where they're doing this.
Sure, absolutely.
And actually, that's a good point. We have a test bed in British Columbia where we have multiple cores, and we're working through some of the challenges. And sharing MNCs may be possible, but it's not desirable either. It adds extra complexity that is likely not warranted. So we would certainly prefer that you direct the Canadian Numbering Association to work through that collaboratively with industry and determine the best way to allocate MNCs efficiently.
In your minds, because I'm sure you've thought about it when you're thinking about MNCs, had you thought about it in terms of one MNC per CIO per province or one MNC total per province?
Where we've discussed this, where we've landed on this is clearly, I mean, different approaches are possible. For example, you heard from RAC and explaining why they felt the more granular you get, the more you strip needless complexity. But at the end of the day, working out technical questions such as that is exactly why the CSCN exists. The last thing we want to do is start second-guessing the work in this form. What we know is that we have the institutional capacity to backstop whatever approach makes sense.
So I get that you're saying that there's an organization there to look through some of these issues, but clearly you'll have some submissions to make to them as well. In your view, could multiple CIOs coordinate to make use of a single MNC in a province? I mean, because we are concerned about the finite number of MNCs.
It's technically possible, but it's operationally less efficient.
Okay.
I would also add to that there are a few sectors that have the capacity really and the wherewithal to operate telecom networks with the scale and the scope needed to take advantage of self-routing. We said in our presentation that we'd be willing to put collars on who would have MNC access based on critical infrastructure operator status, as well as a number of endpoints served, network size, or whatever makes sense. Even as you'll see from the list of existing and planned network operators that already have MNCs assigned on attachment number 2, the bar is currently pretty low. But at the end of the day, we think this is exactly the kind of detail that the CNSC is best positioned to work out.
Okay. And we've heard from some other CIOs in this proceeding that in their view there would need to be definitional changes made to the IMSI guidelines in order to offer the types of services that they envision. So if the Commission were to mandate, for example, full MVNOs, would definitional changes to the IMSI guidelines still be required for you to be able to offer the types of services that you envision?
No.
I can probably speak to that, yes. In a sense, the changes that relate to the IMSI assignment guideline that go to fully MVNOs are already done. And so they fully have that ability. The changes that would need to be made, and again, this really doesn't relate to any tariffs or mandated access or anything else, which we, the CEA is not asking for and does not believe is required, at least for the use cases they have in mind. But what is required is simply changes that go to, for instance, the ability of a critical infrastructure operator to route its traffic across its network and so on without needing exterior customers, or the fact that endpoints are not just consumers, as is described, I think, in the MVNO definition, but devices and so on. So some of this, to be honest, is a bit of a modernization, I think, of the IMSI assignment guideline generally that will be required in the world of 5G and Internet of Things. And there's probably a lot of points of coincidence between that general overhaul and what I think that the CA is looking for.
Okay, but in terms of, I understand what you're saying, and it segues into another question I had that was, if you had this kind of a service, would you, I mean, it's being used within the CIOs of the Electricity Association, but would, for example, handsets be deployed to the workforce?
Notre demande ici présente, c'est vraiment pour des applications de type machine à machine, des applications du type Internet des objets. Ce n'est pas vraiment des demandes qui s'adressent à des téléphones mobiles. On ne vise pas. C'est vraiment pour nos opérations à titre d'une infrastructure critique pour gérer notre réseau d'énergie. Ce n'est pas d'offrir de services à des tiers. Ce n'est pas de se servir de ce MNC-là pour faire nos opérations administratives, mais vraiment pour nos opérations. Pour exploiter notre réseau. C'est pas
oui,
pour
mais pour vos ouvriers, vos employés, est-ce qu'ils auront besoin d'avoir des cellulaires pour communiquer avec...
Ils ont déjà des réseaux cellulaires, ils ont des cellulaires, eux, mais ce n'est pas le but premier. C'est vraiment le but premier, c'est d'aller chercher de la robustesse en combinant l'ensemble des réseaux sur lesquels on va avoir des ententes commerciales négociées. On va combiner la fiabilité, la robustesse de l'ensemble de ces réseaux-là pour avoir un élément qui va en résulter qui va être plus grand que l'ensemble, une fiabilité meilleure que chacune des parties. C'est vraiment pour nos opérations, parce que c'est vraiment là qu'au niveau du toute l'évolution du réseau intelligent, ce qu'on a des besoins, c'est vraiment d'avoir une fiabilité qui est le plus élevé possible pour nous permettre d'être efficaces et aussi être en mesure de pas juste en temps de perturbation ou de catastrophe, de rétablir le service, mais aussi dans nos opérations normales, d'être capable d'amener des applications comme de la maintenance prédictive, être capable d'aller faire des opérations avant même qu'il y ait des défauts sur le réseau, être capable de faire du rétablissement de services rapide pour isoler les choses. Un peu comme au Québec, en novembre dernier, on a eu une tempête de vent. Il y a près je t'ai mis parce que ça m'a touché. Il y a eu près d'1 million de clients qui ont été affectés. Et le genre d'application qu'on vise, c'est ça qui me motive, c'est d'être capable de rétablir le service le plus rapidement possible.
Merci, monsieur.
To add to Sylvain's comments, when we think about worker communications and voice, while the landscape is changing, we still use mobile radio and that critical voice service. And there will be some time yet before that service changes, and I know it is changing. You heard from public safety at this hearing as well, so there is movement happening there. But that's an area where the PSBN is likely to change for critical voice communications towards LTE. But that is a different use case.
Okay, because in your submissions you have been proposing a kind of an MVNO model that you call a private virtual network operator. And in an MVNO model, obviously, we're talking about cellular services. So my question was directed at, is this just a network kind of a process as opposed to, within your operations, your employees have cell phones that are connected to your network as opposed to cell phones connected to the network of a Rogers or a Telus or a Bell?
The technology continues to develop and the landscape changes, so we wouldn't want to preclude anything. But what we're working on now is connecting our machine-to-machine devices in a reliable way.
And if you evolve to the point, sorry, go ahead.
My apologies. And there is a significant distinction between what an MVNO is and what a PVNO is. And the main one is we're not looking to resell the service. We're looking to consume the service on bulk, efficiently route between multiple networks, and then be able to take advantage of diversity of RAN.
Got it. Although my questions are directed as well that even if it's only within your family, as opposed to a resale to a member of the public, the Commission has certain obligations that imposes on wireless service providers related to public alerting, 911 capabilities, that sort of thing. So if down the road you were going to expand into that world of cell phones, even within your own workforce, we would want to know that you would comply with those obligations.
And we would. And I think one of the best examples there is we already operate, all of the utilities in Canada operate large PBX systems. So we manage our own telephone numbers on the wireline side. There's a mechanism to do that. We foresee a mechanism to do the same thing. Not certain how it will be done, but there should be a mechanism to do the same thing. We expect that to work. And not only that, there is always an underlying RAN operator. So the operator that's operating that network, there may be a commercial agreement we can have with them, so they continue to offer the full 911 service, for example, and we don't need to take on that obligation because as the RAN operator, they're still providing that service wherever that tower exists. So we're not we can still consume the service directly from the RAN operator just in bulk with an MNC.
Okay. And how do you compare your approach to the hybrid MNO proposal put forward by Cogeco? I think you mentioned that in your submissions, that there were similarities.
I can maybe speak to that. It's fairly different. I mean, I think at the end of the day, Cogeco is putting forward an approach to market entry in terms of who ought to have access to mandated unbundling of radio access networks. electrical utilities aren't looking for mandated unbundling of radio access networks. There are no thresholds because, it's not something they're looking for the CRTC to do. I think certainly my understanding is that all of the members of the CEA have constant and regular negotiations with telcos, and there's no indication that that would change. And there's, nobody's looking for the CRTC to assist with those negotiations. The difficulty is that they've come to a point in their technological evolution where they need to move into similar spectrum areas that are used for consumer services, and suddenly in holding those negotiations, in a sense, they're not able to come to the table because they're not able to, the example we used is scheduling hockey games but not knowing whether or not you have ice time yet. They're not able to know whether they're going to be able to route the traffic whose capacity they're looking to buy. And so, Cogeco talks about a model where for how long, under what circumstances, certain folks ought to get access to unbundled radio access networks that is mandated. I think here the attitude is really one of, look, we're able to go and negotiate for all that we need. There's just this one thing standing in our way, which is that without having an MNC, we literally could not route the traffic whose capacity we're looking to buy.
So is it closer to the model of the Halton police?
It's almost the reverse in some ways of the model, only because when the Halton police comes to the table and talks about public safety and first responder needs as opposed to critical infrastructure
because they're
needs,
at that end of the spectrum.
They're
the responders.
Well, that's it. They're the first responders.
You're the instigators.
Well, they're not instigators, and there's good cooperation with the public safety sector. I think it's safe to say, but they're the ones for whom the PSBN is designed. They are the primary users, unlike critical infrastructure users who are tertiary, or I'm not sure what the classification is, but it's sort of a subordinated use where available on commercial rates and so on. But when PSBN users come to the table, they have a slice of 700 megahertz spectrum, and perhaps more importantly in terms of this application, they have MNC access. So the very thing that we're looking for is something that they already have.
Right. If the Commission were to mandate full MVNO access, would that be sufficient to meet your needs?
I can probably take this one as well. Again, it's in terms of the needs that are being expressed here, full MVNO access was mandated in 2015, right? The MNC access that Canadian electrical utilities are looking for in order to be able to route their traffic depends only on MNC access, and that's something that full MVNOs have had for a while. They haven't used, or that access hasn't been used to go off and start, MVNO businesses in Canada to a great extent, I suppose, which is one of the issues on the table at this proceeding. But certainly, I think it's fair to say that electrical utilities who run large networks, who procure services at a very large scale from MNOs, who build networks at a very large scale throughout Canada, especially in rural and remote areas where there aren't a lot of people, but where the electricity needs to move, are simply in a bit of a different bargaining position. And I think that they see MNC access, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, as the primary stumbling block, really, to being able to move forward with some of those purchases, some of those negotiations in a way that's consistent with their obligations as folks who are bound by NERC standards and other cybersecurity, resiliency, safety rules that they have to be able to demonstrate they meet constantly. Is that fair?
That's fair, but I could add to it, and you were just getting to it. We want to have direct relationships with the RAN operators. We don't need or desire a middle broker in between us. For the purpose of security, for the purpose of reliability, what we do want to do is be able to route to multiple RAN operators, and then use and basically reward the best performing network with our traffic and our business.
So what's been the experience amongst your members in discussions with carriers?
We've had discussions as an association.
Okay.
We've had several workshops. There's been a fairly...
With the carriers as a group or
with the carriers as a group. I mean, individual members have had individual communications as well, and that's ongoing as large operators of telecom systems and as large consumers of telecom services from the MNOs. There's always ongoing discussion at a individual member level. But as an association, we've had workshops and we've discussed this as an industry. How do we move forward? And there's been many offers or suggestions, mitigations put forward, but we do keep coming back to this with an MNC routing traffic as a very good solution.
So, but I'd like to understand. Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
Pas de problème. Je voulais juste rajouter un point, c'est que nous, on a parlé en fait beaucoup avec les fournisseurs de réseau. On leur a expliqué notre problème, puis qu'est-ce qu'on essaie de... Je pense qu'ils ont bien compris le point. Ils ont travaillé très fort pour essayer de trouver des solutions alternatives à notre besoin, mais à chaque fois, ça revient toujours au même point. D'un point de vue sécurité, on ne peut pas subordonner notre sécurité aux opérateurs. Puis ça revient tout le temps. Et puis la deuxième chose, c'est qu'ils ne peuvent pas nous offrir un service où qu'on aurait de la redondance du réseau d'accès radio. Parce que ça voudrait dire qu'il y aurait des ententes entre compétiteurs et puis ça n'arrive pas. Donc ces services-là ne sont pas offerts par les commerciaux. Donc c'est pour ça qu'on a besoin d'avoir un MNC pour pouvoir établir ces services-là.
Alors, un des problèmes, c'est qu'ils ne vont vous pas donner le niveau de service que vous désirez avoir.
Absolument. Absolument.
We've also heard from Bell Mobility last week that although some associations had approached them, in their view, there wasn't an internal alignment, I think was a term used by Mr. Bibick, as to what services the members required. Do you have any comment to make on that?
En fait, au contraire, l'association est complètement enlignée vers un but commun, que ce soit l'association des trains ou le Halton Police. Tout le monde converge vers l'idée que, premièrement, les réseaux LTE, les réseaux cellulaires 5G, c'est le futur. Mais pour pouvoir vraiment en bénéficier de tous les avantages, ça prend le MNC pour pouvoir avoir le contrôle sur ces réseaux-là. Donc, l'alignement, je ne vois pas en quoi on ne serait pas aligné à ce niveau-là sur cette question.
Okay. Anybody else? There are parties that have suggested that it would be premature to address the various CIO solutions given the ongoing public safety broadband network project or the BC Hydro PVNO trial. So what are your thoughts on waiting until a specific PSBN model is agreed upon before we would consider your proposal?
Well, we've already been waiting a long time, so I'm trying to find a polite way. Maybe I should drop it back to Francis, but we want to move forward.
This is your opportunity to let us know your thoughts.
We want to move forward.
Okay.
And those things will come, and they'll offer services that we likely can use. But this is the solution that we would like to access now, and we don't really know the outcomes of those other elements. And let's say that the PSBN moves forward and electricity is very well integrated into that solution. Having an MNC and being able to use their RAN in the PVNO model is a good thing. We will have numbering resources. We'll be able to route traffic into the PSBN. It'll be easy for the PSBN to identify our devices because we'll have unique identities for critical infrastructure. And there's no downside to having an MNC and a PVNO now. If anything, it may help the PSBN find a solution and move forward. We could become users on that system or on other RANs.
And in terms of timing, I mean, our first step in this approach was to approach the CRTC in 2018, 2 years ago. It was suggested to us that not that we simply go and participate in the CSCN, but that we bring the issue forward in this proceeding. We think you're following through with a direct instruction to the CSCN would be the most effective and most direct route to enabling IoT leadership, for example, rural and remote deployment assistance, and competitive intensity that we believe our access to MNCs will help unlock.
Okay. In your further comments that you submitted, you stated that many benefits of PVNO, namely ground-level connectivity, security, commercial cellular field area network interconnection, are not dependent on RAN diversity. And I'm just wondering if you could explain that, unpack it for me. That was at paragraph 22 of your November 22nd, 2019 submission.
In the further comments, we were talking how the MNOs have built excellent networks. They connect to people in building, to limited extent underground, and those networks already exist. So if a CEA member was able to access a current MNO network with the correct level of reliability and security, but to retract the reliability, like just if it was a single network and the CEA member could hold the security credentials and controls, they would still have very good ground level connectivity. When you start to layer the different networks that have already been built, that already exist and are managed by very qualified companies, you don't just have security, you have incredible reliability as well. But the security and the reliability are slightly separate conversations. Would anyone else like to add?
I think it's also important that, so RAN diversity is a key benefit that we can access with PVNO. But if there is if there is only a single RAN, having a PVNO is not a problem. It still works. It's just you have a single RAN to access.
But in your model, you would have multiple RANs to a PVNO core, is that right?
We would have a core, and we'd be able to route to multiple RANs.
Okay.
So I mean, when we there's been a lot of discussion at this hearing about RAN sharing. And I think it's an important point to note that there is a benefit to having multiple diverse RANs. So as more and more RAN sharing occurs, that diversity opportunity, in fact, goes away.
But as I understand it, that's because if one fails, you've got the other one, right, as the backup.
Correct.
Okay. If the Commission were to mandate more than one network to provide a wholesale MVNO service, then would the specialized PVNO solution still be necessary? I guess, is there any other way the networks differ?
I don't completely understand what you mean by mandate a wholesale, but if you mean mandate MVNO,
right,
then it wouldn't.
Okay.
Because MVNO is different. We don't want the middle broker.
You don't want the middle guy.
We want to work directly. So, and we're also not asking for a tariff. We're asking for the opportunity to have the numbering resource to negotiate. We're not mobile network service providers, but we do operate telecom systems. We are a capital-intensive asset management company. So we understand the notion of return on capital and the way the telcos operate their business as well. So I believe we're in a good position to negotiate with them for fair and reasonable service.
Okay. And in your submission, would it just be the national MNOs that would be obligated to provide the wholesale RAN access, or would you also want any of the regional carriers under a PVNO model to provide service?
We're not asking for anybody to be obligated, but we do want to make, in fact, one of the benefits of the PVNO solution is it'll make it easier for us to access regional RANs. So today it's fairly common for a large utility to have a primary MNO and perhaps a secondary MNO and two major contracts, but it's much less common to have a contract with a regional MNO. And with a PVNO and the ability to route, it would be much easier to integrate regional MNOs into our networks, and then basically reward them if they have the best network, particularly in a rural area, with the traffic, which further adds viability to their business model.
Okay.
It benefits everyone.
I think I understand what you're saying. And then I just had a question about eSIMs. In your further comments, and again, I'm referring to the November 22nd, 2019 comments at paragraph 23, you said that eSIMs are not necessary for PVNOs because a PVNO would achieve the same thing as an eSIM through a simpler mechanism. So I'd like to understand that a little bit better.
Yes. What we're asking for is an MNC that uses the protocols that already exist for interconnecting different networks. The eSIM is not necessary to a PVNO because an eSIM is for the remote reprovisioning of a SIM card. If you have your own MNC, your own identity, you can route your traffic to multiple networks, which is the core ask. So you don't need to then ask someone else to change your SIM card to route your traffic. You can route your own traffic. You can maintain your core functionality.
And then if you did not get the MNC that you've requested, then eSIMs, would that be your next preferred solution?
eSIMs would do little for us.
Okay.
And in addition to that, eSIMs are relatively complex to implement. That typically comes at a cost, and in many cases, they're not even managed in country. So there's questionable security, and there's some risks, perhaps, around the eSIM management and then exposing your SIM to that remote provisioning. So, no, we're not. eSIM wouldn't solve the problem. eSIM is a sliver of it. If we had our own MNC, and eSIM may be an effective way to reconfigure our SIM card if we needed to, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem.
So I take it that what you want is an MNC.
If I may, I was just looking at that part of the submission, and the subhead is eSIMs are not necessary for PVNO, nor do they address service reliability or security. And that's really what it is. At the end of the day, it's a way of single homing to one network, and then if that doesn't work, you can perhaps fail over more quickly to another network. And then, dynamic routing is quite a different beast, and it's really what network operators do, such as electrical utilities.
Right.
Whereas otherwise, you're sort of captive to the one service provider, or at best, captive to failing over quickly. And I suppose, and this is something we talked about a fair bit, there's always ways to engineer very complex solutions that avoid the standards-based way of doing things. At the end of the day, that's kind of what we're talking about doing. There's a straight line here, and that is the MNC. And, one can perhaps, incorporate extremely clever algorithms into computers on a chip inside eSIMs one day in the future. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is reinventing that for which a solution already exists.
Right. Great. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chairman.